Okay, so we are at week 3 of the poetry tournament. And a couple things I want to point out. Remember, with your poetry assignments, there are several steps. You watch the video, and then you go to that poem and you answer questions and evaluate it. And then you watch more video, and then you go to that poem. So it is clear to me that I'm talking to 7th graders in particular, that you're not watching the video. And your reactions to the poem, I would like you to push through. Some of you get hung up on the fact that the poems don't rhyme. And remember, poems that rhyme, it's just one kind of poem. And I picked 2 poems to go head to head that have something in common with the theme or maybe the style, so that they're different examples. So rhyming poems are not always the best poems. I just want you to open up your mind to that. Yes, it is something that you evaluate, but also the rhythm, the repetition, because remember, poems are meant to be read out loud. So I would like, and I think there's really 2 of you. You are vocal about these poems don't rhyme, and I want you to push past that because we are analyzing and not criticizing. So just think about that. Now, this first poem we're going to do, it's Ode to Enchanted Light. Very beautiful poem, short. So I want you to open up that poem in a tab, and you can listen to me as you're looking at the actual poem. Otherwise, what I'm talking about won't make sense. If you keep clicking back and forth, it won't make sense. So you can hear me, but you are looking at the tab with the actual poem. So you can see. And again, these are questions. Now, this time on the poetry, you're going to answer questions. And they're real questions. They're real questions that I'm talking about in the video right now. I need to see a little bit more engagement. Now, 8th graders, you guys are nailing it. So this is going to be easy. It's going to be easy peasy to you. But the 7th graders, you're going to have to step it up a little bit. And no, you can't retake stuff. You need to slow down. And you need to follow directions. And this is me using a very firm teacher voice. So you can see 15 lines. You can see poems are made of lines and they're grouped into like paragraphs. So you can see you have 3 stanzas. And you can see the first stanza has 9 lines and the second stanza has 3 and the third stanza has 3. So it doesn't really follow too much of a pattern, kind of, with, the last 2 stanzas being smaller. And that's like punctuated. And if you notice, the first stanza is a sentence. It starts with under the tree's light, and line 9, white sand, has a period after it on purpose. And then 10 through 12, it's a sentence. And then 13 through 15 is a sentence. So that's kind of cool how Pablo Neruda, a Spanish speaker, kind of came up with the idea of this poem. Because remember, poets, they always are very choosy when they pick words because they're thinking of sound devices. A poem is meant to be read out loud. So when you hear a poem, you can feel that rhythm. And some of you are really getting into that rhythm and you're noticing, I like the rhythm of this poem versus that poem. So that really excited me. The whole rhyming thing is not exciting me at all. So we're going to push past that. So here we go. Let's read Ode to Enchanted Light by Pablo Neruda. Under the tree's light has dropped from the top of the sky, light like a green latticework of branches shining on every leaf, drifting down like clean white sand. A cicada sends its sawing song high into the empty air. The world is a glass overflowing with water. I'm having a tough time reading, sorry. So beautiful. A moment in time. So whenever I read this poem, I always think of a summer day, like a July summer day where it's warm and the grass is still a bit green. Maybe it's late June. And I'm lying underneath a tree and the grass is really, really soft. And the tree has a lot of leaves and such on it. So I'm thinking sometime in the later morning, afternoon, maybe even evening time. And if you've ever done that before, because growing up, that's what we did. We hung out at this park that had trees and also swing set and slides and stuff. And it was near my house. It was only 2 blocks away. We used to lay under the trees and we would look up at the sky with, we'd be on our backs looking up at the sky. And you can get an idea of how the sun comes through the branches. So it says, under the trees, light has dropped from the top of the sky. So the sun is dropping from the top of the sky. Just a cool metaphor of how the sunbeams come down. And then the poet goes on to say, or the speaker goes on to say, light like a green lattice work of branches. So lattice work is that stuff that crisscrosses, and people put it up for like viney growing things like sweet peas, or like some protection from various things. It's just a very easy thing, and it just looks like lace, but it's made of wood. So thinking about the branches, how they crisscross, and then the light comes through it, and shining on every leaf, drifting down like clean white sand. So talking about the light, comparing it to clean white sand as it comes down. So remember, if you compare two things using like or as, what's that called again? It's called a simile. If you don't use like or as, it's a metaphor. Okay? And then you have a cicada sends its sawing song high into the empty air. A cicada is like a grasshopper. And they make the, if you've ever lived anywhere where there's a lot of grasshoppers, or maybe you have grasshoppers at your house, they do this like sawing sound. So they sound like chirping, kind of like a cricket, I guess. High into the empty air. And then the last stanza, the world is a glass overflowing with water. So when you compare a world with a glass of water, what is that again? And there is no like or as. That would be a metaphor. So I've just helped you amazingly on some of these things. So as you scroll down and you start answering these questions, I did take pictures of my vocab binder. So those people who skip through and don't watch the video, you have a chance. So of course you put your first and last name. Most of you are really good about that. In lines 3 through 5. So then you have to scroll up. So which type of figurative language is in lines 3 through 5? Light, like a green lattice work of branches. Okay, remember, comparing two unlike things using like or as. Is it a metaphor or is it a simile? So you need to make sure you answer that one correctly. Personification, remember, is non-human thing acts human. So that's a distractor. And then if you take a peek at what two things are being compared, hopefully you've figured that one out. And then line 13 to 15. So you scroll up there, the world is a glass overflowing with water. You know, this is not overflowing, no. And then the next question, asking you what's being compared in line 13 to 15. And then 8 to 9, lines 8 to 9, drifting down like clean white sand. Do you remember an alliteration is the repetition of consonant sounds in a line of poetry? So you want to take a peek at that. The vocab's there as well. And line 11, again. And then mood, remember, is the emotional atmosphere in a piece of writing. And then I think you can answer the others. And then I did change it so that when you rate it, it doesn't cost you points. I figured out a way to make it required yet not points. So good for me. Anyway, so take a peek at that one. So the next poem is called Last Night the Rain Spoke to Me by Mary Oliver. And you can see that one too. So the way the words are put onto the page as you're looking at it, you can notice each stanza is 4 lines long. That's kind of a pattern. But if you look at the names, night, rain, me, saying, joy, falling, cloud. So it doesn't rhyme. So it's really free verse, but it is following some patterns. And you notice most of the lines have, around 2 to say 5 words in each line. So it's the way it's put on the page is interesting. The other thing I think is interesting is it's different from Ode to Enchanted Light, where it's not, each stanza isn't a sentence. So that's kind of interesting how that's broken up as well. So you can see 36 lines long. You can see it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 stanzas in length. So an interesting poem. I really like this poem. And no, it doesn't rhyme. And you're going to have to put on your get over it caps and get over it because it's a great poem. It's a great poem because I like the message. I think it's a fun, really creative way to write about this particular theme. So let's read it. Last night the rain spoke to me. So when you have a non-human thing acting human, what is that? Is that a metaphor? Is it a simile? Or is it a personification? It's a personification when a non-human thing. So rain can't actually talk to us. So even having rain spoke to me in the title, it's a personification, which I think is really cool. But at the same time, you have probably awoken in the middle of the night by rain falling on your window, on the roof. And there seems to be sometimes it feels like rain can talk to us, and it definitely can establish a mood, right? Okay, so Last Night the Rain Spoke to Me by Mary Oliver. Last night the rain spoke to me, slowly saying, "What joy to come falling out of the brisk cloud, to be happy again in a new way on the earth." That's what it said as it dropped, smelling of iron, and vanished like a dream of the ocean into the branches and the grass below. Then it was over. The sky cleared. I was standing under a tree. The tree was a tree with happy leaves, and I was myself. And there were stars in the sky that were also themselves at which moment my right hand was holding my left hand, which was holding the tree, which was filled with stars. And the soft rain, imagine the long and wondrous journeys still to be ours. So you notice when I read it, if you were following along, you have to read it until you come to the end punctuation. So if you go to the tip top, last night the rain spoke to me, slowly saying, "What joy to come falling out of the brisk cloud, to be happy again in a new way on the earth." That's the first sentence. So you have to say that, you pause where commas are, but you say that together. And then you get the next sentence. That's what it said as it dropped, smelling of iron, and vanished like a dream of the ocean into the branches and the grass below. That's the second sentence. So when you read it and you're trying to hear that rhythm, make sure you pause at the sentences so it's not meant to be read stanza by stanza by stanza. You don't say, "Last night the rain spoke to me, slowly saying, what joy to come falling out of the brisk sky, to be happy again in a new way," because otherwise it doesn't make sense, right? So I think it's pretty creative how she broke up the lines. They're almost always not at the end of a stanza, except for the last one, obviously, because it ends. And she does have punctuation. Line 34, she does have some repetition there. But I think she's just being emphatic. Imagine, because that's cool. So a bunch of questions, a bunch of things to talk about in this poem. So rain can't actually talk to us, so we know that's a personification. But this poem is filled with two significant, besides rhythm, two sound devices that make it sound so cool and it's fun to read. It's filled with alliteration. Remember, alliteration is when you have the repetition of consonant sounds in a line of poetry. So there's a lot of alliteration here. There's a lot of repetition here, and there's just gorgeous rhythm throughout. And there's personifications, because I don't think leaves are happy. But you can definitely look at leaves out there, and they can look happy, like the brand new ones. And they can look sad when they're just about to fall from the tree, or they've already fallen and they're decaying on the ground. A couple things I want to point out to you. I think you can figure out most of these questions, but jump to line 18. Line 18. So lines 1 through 17 talk about rain is falling from the sky, right? And line 13, smelling of iron. Remember that two things being compared are either metaphor or simile, if it has like or as. And a personification is when a non-human thing acts human. But remember, there's other rich ways of writing. And when you include sight, smell, touch, taste, sound, we call it imagery. And so line 13, if you talk about something smelling of iron, that's something you could smell. And it's something that maybe evokes a memory in you. It definitely, for me, it does as well. But you get to line 18 and it says, then it was over. So you have the rain is falling down, and it's very descriptive. It's falling to the earth, and it's so happy to be free and doing that. And then it falls in the branches and the grasses And then line 18 says, then it was over. So there's definite change in the speaker. Then it was over. And then you get to line 19 and it says the sky cleared. Now, are we talking literally the sky cleared? Or is that hinting at something else? And I think everything creative about this poem, it's hinting at something else. I think when you talk about a sky clearing, that's often a symbol for things get better. Like a mind that might be clouded with negative thoughts or sadness or depression or being overwhelmed or whatever, anxiety, whatever. When skies clear, that feeling, that oppressive feeling is gone. And so I think line 19 is saying things are getting better. And then it shifts from talking about the rain to I was standing under a tree. And then you have to think about it. The tree had happy leaves and I was myself. And then you look up and there's stars and they're themselves. And that the I in the poem, the speaker, is very present and repeats at the moment, at which moment. So right here. And then you get this part where I just love this part. And a lot of you are going to be like, what? But don't. My right hand, says my right hand, was holding my left hand, which was holding the tree. So imagine like somebody putting their arms around the tree. And then they look up and the stars in the sky, you can see them through the branches. And then you have that soft rain. And at the very end, love it. The long and wondrous journey still to be ours. I just think that's gorgeous. So you're going to take some time and answer these questions that I'm really, really, really helping you out with. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, yeah. And you can't retake stuff. You need to slow down and enjoy these poems for what they are and rate them. Don't let my bias affect you. Okay. I'll see you in the next assignment.